Welcome to the CISO Wise podcast. Join Dr. Earl Crane, founder of CISO Wise, as he interviews CISOs and cybersecurity experts on their wisdom gained from years of experience on what works and what doesn't in building a cybersecurity program. This week we're joined by Alan Levine, former CISO of Alcoa. Listen to CISO Wise on the go by subscribing to the CISO Wise podcast, available on all podcast apps.
Everything about cybersecurity for me was always hard, and frankly, if I went out and became a new CISO today from scratch for some new organization, it would be hard all over again.
This episode is brought to you by the Carnegie Mellon University CISO Certificate Program, which is named a National Center of Academic Excellence in Information Assurance Education by the NSA and the Department of Homeland Security. In the CISO program, you will learn the skills you need to be an effective CISO through targeted, interdisciplinary coursework and hands-on practical applications led by faculty from Carnegie Mellon University's Hines College and the Software Engineering Institute, including yours truly. I invite you to learn more by visiting hines.cmu.edu/CISO or follow the link in the show notes below.
I'm joined today with Alan Levine. With over 35 years of experience leading global cybersecurity programs, Alan is the former CISO for two Fortune 500 companies, Alcoa and Arconic. He is also a founding board instructor at the Carnegie Mellon CISO program, where he lectures to current and rising CISOs on stories from the trenches. Alan, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good to be here, Earl.
When you were needing to build a security program, anything that ever surprised you as something that was either harder than you expected when you got started or easier once you got things rolling than you thought?
Everything that I got into, certainly when I had my chance to create a global program for Alcoa beginning in 1997, everything was hard. Nothing was easy. I was on the job 3 weeks, and suddenly the audit department, internal audit, delivered a report to me. It was their annual infrastructure audit of Alcoa's IT function worldwide. It had 21 major findings, including 17 in security. And so I was 3 weeks on the job, and I knew that the organization had just dug a hole for me that was likely deeper than I was ever going to be able to crawl out of.
That sounds hard.
Everything that I have ever done in cybersecurity has been hard. Finding the right technology to fill a particular gap in a stack, hard. Keeping up with the technology so that I would know what the next gen looks like, hard. Dealing with the staffing an organization and then maintaining it, sustaining those people in their personal lives in a cybersecurity world where the demands are 24/7, but I know that they need to be people too, hard. Developing and enforcing policy at the corporate level, very hard. In my case, I had the additional accountability at Alcoa. I wasn't just CISO, I was the chief privacy officer as well, which meant I spent most nights arguing with myself. Hard. Everything about cybersecurity for me was always hard, and frankly, if I went out and became a new CISO today from scratch for some new organization, it would be hard all over again.
Let's wind that back a minute. For someone who's new in a CISO position, put yourself back where you came in 3 weeks on the job, you just got 17 findings for information security. How did you deal with it then? And more importantly, if you had to do it a second time for a new CISO that just had that dropped on their lap, how should they deal with that?
Yeah, well, I'd start off by taking your chief internal auditor to lunch, right? And make sure you pick up the tab. I didn't the first time around. I would do it the next time. I'd probably take him out for a nice steak dinner. The internal audit often seems like the adversary, and we get confused about that. We have to remember that our internal audit function is our friend. They are our partner. It is our cooperation through our work and their inspection, their assessment, that combined create what I hope will be an ongoing in control and capable environment.
What do you mean by in control?
In control, meaning we've established the controls we believe are important. The audit department has assessed them, and yes, they make sense. And yeah, we seem to be mostly adhering to them. And capable, meaning that we're capable of doing the things that cybersecurity people need to do in order to sustain themselves, the program, and the company. I always said that you could boil down a CISO's job description to 3 words: protect the organization.
A cartoon from a while back on the Washington Post: things you never hear in the office. Boy, I feel secure today. Everyone's feeling very secure today. Isn't the security great today?
That's exactly
Never
right.
happens.
Never happens. Exactly. That's it. Although I rarely had a situation where I ever got credit for winning, because the threats were never going to lessen. I believe to this day that we will never be more secure than we are today, more cyber secure than we are today. The risks will continue. The solutions will try to defend.
That isn't a very optimistic picture.
If you've ever played sports, you know offense is better than defense. The bad guys get to play offense. All we can do is play defense. Some of us do it well and still lose. Some of us do it poorly, and by the grace of who knows what, don't get in trouble. They say the average tenure of a CISO now is about 2 years. I think there's a reason for that. And it's not just because they burn out or because they move on for better comp. And I've heard those excuses. No, I think it's because they fail. They may fail personally to the point where they don't think they can do the job well. They may fail organizationally to the point where the organization decides it's time for them to go. But failure when it comes to cybersecurity is absolutely an option. And if you're going to be a CISO,
Part of the program.
It's part of the program.
Yes, it's part of the package that you signed up for.
You said earlier that one of the things that works
Is making friends, allies
Absolutely.
with your internal audit.
Sure, in the audit department, the legal department, the procurement department, in your executive council, you should know your general counsel and he should know you. I do not recommend ever that a CISO report to a CEO because he or she will never have time for you. They're running a very large operation and cybersecurity is a subset. Additionally, if you have an enterprise risk manager or officer, you want to get very close with that person. If you have a physical security operation in your company, short of convergence between cybersecurity and physical security, you want to make sure that you work very closely with those folks. They're putting in swipe card readers, which are feeding over your network in order to get to computers that you're accountable for securing.
That's a lot of different parties to work with. How did you do it?
In my case, I thought it was critically important to get as close as I could to as many users as I could. Starting at the supervisory level and working my way down. Alcoa was a company of over 300,000 FTEs. That's a lot. Add on another 75,000 or so contractors and consultants, and you're at a small city. And my goal was, over time, to meet or speak with as many of those individuals as I could, either on the phone, in a colloquy where I was addressing a group, on a trip where I would meet them, whether it was in Szekesfehérvár, Hungary, or whether it was in Perth, Australia, or in Poços de Caldas, Brazil. I might not speak their language, they might not understand everything I was saying, but the fact that I would show up meant a lot to them, and they became not obstacles to what I wanted to get done in cybersecurity, they became facilitators because of that.
As you look past at some of the things that have worked, what actions or controls have had a greater effect than you expected? What can you look back on and say, that was a really smart one?
Yeah, I would say number one, top of the list for me would be end user education. Awareness training. I missed the boat on that the first 2 times I could have grabbed that brass ring, and I didn't bite. And I paid for it. We were not doing annual fish testing. I wasn't going out of my way to train my users. So I considered every one of my users gullible, envious, sometimes half-brained. They were easily distracted. An Amazon gift card was always going to get their attention in an offer, even if it was for $5. And so the French philosopher Sartre had a definition of hell. His definition of hell was, hell is other people. I had 300,000 other people, and they were all my hell. There's a lot of hell. And so I think the first brass ring that I finally grabbed after 2 failed attempts was a formal awareness program. I think that the more you can do to train your users to identify a phish, to identify a suspicious website, to think before they click, at that level, it's all about binary choices. Open the email or don't. Open the attachment or don't. Click on the link or don't. There's no third choice. Over time, I learned the value of helping my users make the right choices.
So help users make better decisions.
I would reinforce awareness training, which doesn't cost that much, but has an amazingly high value rate of return if you do it right. Your user is truly your last line of defense. That's when all of your technology has failed, all of your policy has failed. The email somehow made it through all of your SMTP filters, and now it's sitting in a user's Outlook inbox. And now they have to make that choice that I talked about earlier. The more you educate them, the better off they'll be, and the better off your program will be as a result. Bang for the buck, I'm not sure that you can spend your money more wisely than on your users.
So to reinforce your user awareness, one of my favorite stories, I had an old boss who we did not know it was him for the first year. But if you ever left your laptop unlocked and you got up and walked away and he walked by, he would reply all to the entire organization. For the longest time, people couldn't figure out who it was, but people did make sure to lock their screens.
One of the places where I really always wanted to do something more than we could, and I tried, had to do with managing USBs. Because everybody's got a thumb drive, and everybody has their kids' high school graduation pictures on it, and they want to bring it in and plug it into their laptop and show it to all their colleagues. But you don't know what else might be on that thumb drive. So we actually put a program in place where we got 500 thumb drives. On them, we put one file, just one. The name of it was executive compensation. And then we took those 500 thumb drives and distributed them throughout our company's world. We left them in coffee rooms primarily. We left them on some cases right on folks' desks or underneath their chair on the carpet. We had 500 of them just to do it.
Dropping little digital grenades.
That's right. And
because each one of those
would
then phone back home as soon as they plugged
it in. We had them all set up so they would phone back home.
I ran this exact same program using CDs because USBs weren't there yet enough. And the auto run feature that was built in. It's very effective for the cost of a couple thumb drives.
Very effective.
Because you find that the name of the people that plugged it in, the computer, you get their IP address, where they were, and next thing you can do is you can call them up.
But then you go back to that conversation about trust and confidence, which is, again, I firmly believe the key to all of this, not technology, not processes, people. This is all about people trusting people. The number of folks who, even when we now knew, they had the thumb drive, they had plugged it into their company asset, they had opened the file that said executive compensation, and then they had closed it. To a man and woman, everyone that we confronted said, I didn't do it. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do it. Your data's wrong. Invariably, in most cases, if they found it in a coffee room after they opened it up and a message came up saying, basically, you've been caught. Why did you do this? Don't you know the dangers of USBs? They shut down their laptop and they ran back to the coffee room and put the USB back where they found it. They had some plausible but not really viable deniability, right? They lied to me. And so I walked away from that exercise believing maybe that wasn't the right thing to do, because to have so many of my users lie to me means they don't trust me. And if they don't trust me, we're back to the original problem, aren't we? Right? They won't do what I want them to do. And they won't be my last line of defense after all else fails if they don't trust me.
And that leads into maybe not even user education, but how do you increase the level of trust with your users?
And I think you increase it, by not surprising them, not playing tricks on them. I think you can do a fish test. I think people are wise enough to the risks of email and phishing and SMS vishing, right, that they will understand when and why you're testing them. But as you begin to blow that out to USBs and all the other ways that we can test their behavior, we have this conversation with some of the folks that I work with in the industry. We call it the carrot and the stick, right? So if someone fails to behave the way you really wanted them to, whether they were trained or not, let's say they were trained, and because of that, you bring the stick down on them, you tell their boss, it affects their comp, they get 3 days without pay, anything's possible. Companies can do nefarious stuff to their employees. I think that ends up being sour talk at the water cooler, and invariably everybody is now saying, boy, you know, our real villain is Alan. And it has the exact opposite effect of what I was hoping to get out of it. I was hoping to bring more folks into the tent, and instead all I got was angry.
So something to take away for a new CISO, one that's looking at security awareness programs that they're considering, is that a number of them may blow back in ways that they did not anticipate.
Right.
And it might actually be, if not more dangerous, at least maybe more damaging.
Sure. What is it? I mean, in part, does a CISO really have to have an advanced degree in psychology? I mean, in order to do his or her job? Maybe. Because if it's true, as I believe, that at the end of the day, it's all about people, well, then you better know a lot about what motivates people.
You're trying to socially engineer your employees to have better behavior. Yeah. So yeah, you do need to be a psychologist.
You simply want to teach them to do the right thing. That's all. It sounds so simple, but people are people, and the right thing is hard. And that was an ongoing struggle for me till the last day. What am I going to do? Replace my entire population of users because they have now gotten to the point where they have no trust in me? No, I think it's really important to build that trust in every way that you can. And so I actually went out of my way to embrace BYOD once I learned that most of our users wanted it, and then worked with our lawyers to try and craft a EUA that was benevolent instead of malignant, right? And that was very difficult with our lawyers because they wanted a much harder line. And then I didn't do things like USB tricking again.
One of the last questions I had for you is, what's one of the most misunderstood things about being a CISO? But I think you've actually started to answer it already as needing to be a psychologist as well.
Yeah. But you need to be more than that. What is a CISO? He's a psychologist because he or she needs to understand people. He's an anthropologist or an archaeologist because he's constantly referring to history, right? A CISO needs to be able to look back in order to find out what happened, in order to figure out what to do now or in the future. Not just in terms of having lessons learned from events, but even in terms of how much data you collect in your SIM. It's history, but it's valuable history. When we set up our SIM in the beginning, we put it in a cloud, and I remember the vendor, the supplier saying to me, well, you know, the average customer is keeping 2 weeks worth of data. I said, I want to keep a year. And they said, why do you want to keep a year? I said, because you'll frown on me if I say 10 years. So we'll just keep a year. A CISO will always have one less day's data than they really needed. That is the truth of forensics, right? Of cybersecurity forensics. I only wish I had Tuesday. I think invariably we are, all of us in the cybersecurity profession, archaeologists and anthropologists as well. We're studying the culture, and that's the anthropology part, and we're digging the dirt of what may have happened 10 months ago on some part of our network or some part of a cloud that we're related to, in order to find some evidence of something that is impacting us now. I mean, invariably, you get the call from government and they tell you that, Houston, you have a problem. They're not going to say you have a problem now. It's going to be past tense. You've had a problem. I think that a CISO also needs to be a finance expert in order to manage the budget. And frankly, that means at the end of the day, they better be a combination of Harry Houdini as a magician and an amazingly Nobel Prize-worthy mathematician. And I think in some organizations, you have folks who are really good technologists as CISOs, but don't know how to manage money. In other organizations, you have folks who are really good at managing money, but aren't really good technologists. I think you want to be as good as you can at all of that. I'm not sure that there is a category, psychologist, anthropologist, archaeologist, mathematician. I'm not sure that there's a category a CISO doesn't need to be. I have had the situation where one of my users was having the first outbreak of a devastating personal cyber attack on her and her family and her home. And I and a member of my team got in a car and drove, close to 80 miles one way, in order to get to her, in order to see physically what was going on. And so now what was I? Now I'm making house calls. I'm a doctor, right? So, and maybe that's
doctor,
a good...
nurse, and therapist.
Yeah, that leads me maybe to the last notion if we're wrapping up, Earl, which is that in a sense CISOs are doctors, but we have a very specialized problem as doctors, which is that our job is to sell medicine, a solution to our population, to our organization that tastes bad. So it's going to be disruptive. It's going to be a real yuck for the organization to have to do this, burdensome. That is painful in some cases. Think about a horse pill that you might have to take that a doctor prescribes for you. That is too expensive, and everything in medicine today, especially pharmaceuticals, too expensive. And most importantly, for a condition we may not even believe we have. So I'm trying to
The
sell you.
diagnosis might even be wrong.
That's right. So a CISO is trying, in some cases, it may be apparent to an organization, if not to him or her, it's too painful, it doesn't taste good, it costs too much, and it may not work anyway. And by the way, that is the definition of most cybersecurity defense programs.
Alan, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your experience,
and wisdom.
some hard stories and some personal stories.
Stories here on the CISO Wise podcast.
Thank you.
You have been listening to the CISO Wise podcast. Learn more about how you can get the wisdom and insights of a world-class CISO as your cybersecurity mentor at www.cisowise.com.